This video is going to challenge you, but if you see it through and watch to the end, I have a strong confidence that by the time you leave, you will be able to handle what's going on up here and in here 10 times better. In this video, we're going to be discussing the truth about stewarding and healing your mind according to the scriptures. And if you're new here, what's up? My name's Christian. I make content about mental health, all from a biblical perspective, so that we can all heal, grow, and make an impact on the world as Christ intended. So a lot of us will struggle in this life. We're guaranteed to struggle in this life. We know that from John 16:33, right? Jesus promised that we will have trouble in this life, right? So when it comes to mental health, there's no exception. We need to understand that struggling is necessary to heal, right? If you want to heal, if you want to handle whether it's trauma or deal with depression or deal with anxiety or whatever it is, whatever the mental thing is, you need to understand that struggle will be part of that process. But if you run from that struggle, if you fear it, if you avoid it, you avoid that discomfort, then you will never heal. And honestly speaking, this is a big reason why there are so many Christians who are mentally weak, so many Christians who are mentally, not there, not well, because of just constantly chasing comfort. Discomfort is part of the process of healing. Discomfort is part of the process of growing. And we see this throughout scripture. And we're going to head into Genesis 32 with Jacob wrestling with God to illustrate this point. So in Genesis 32, just for some context, Jacob, who stole Esau's birthright, is fleeing from his brother. Esau is his brother, right? And he gave up all of his stuff, a lot of his things, his possessions. So he's pretty much without anything. And he's fleeing from his brother because his brother wants to kill him. The scripture says at verse 22, it says, the same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. So Jacob was without everything at this point, right? And so it continues to say, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, What is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. So let's take a step back. Something we really need to note here is that Jacob had to come to the end of himself in order to meet a blessing. And not just come to the end of himself. That's when the struggle really began. So when it comes to your mental health, when it comes to things that you're struggling with, whether it be anxiety, depression, whatever it is, right? You will probably come to a point where you come to the end of yourself, where you felt like you can't do it anymore, where you're tired, you're exhausted, you're ready for a change. Understand that that's when the struggle really begins. Okay, so that when you start going to therapy, when you start, meeting with a mentor, that's when your struggle really begins, because you're going against everything that you're used to, and you're fighting old habits, you're fighting old patterns, you're fighting your past, right? In order for a better tomorrow. Understanding that is what's going to make you succeed, because of what a lot of people do is that because of how mental health is viewed with social media, how mental health is viewed online, they think, okay, mental health is just me writing in my journal and maybe looking at a sunset and making myself some tea. That can be part of self-care and mental health, right? And caring for your mind. However, the true growth happens when you wrestle. And it's not just wrestling with yourself, but also wrestling with God, wrestling with the scriptures. Something I like to say is that there's always a gap between the apprehension of knowledge and the application of knowledge. And in that gap is where you wrestle, where you may see in the scriptures that you're called to be joyful, you're called to be thankful in all situations. And you're thinking, okay, how am I going to do that, right? And then once you have that apprehension of knowledge, there's a wrestle until you start applying that in your life, until those scriptures become fulfilled in your life. Again, hear me when I say that there will be a fight for your mental health. You will have to fight. We have gotten so comfortable with comfort that we're not willing to do the things that are needed in order for us to grow. You will not overcome depression by not confronting it. You will not overcome anxiety by not confronting it. It will take struggle. It will take work. Whatever that thing, whatever, like I said, whatever the mental health thing is, whatever the trauma is, whatever the emotional issues that you're having right now is, it will take work. And this is uncomfortable. But nowhere in the scriptures does God promise that growth is comfortable. In fact, the opposite is promised. We see right here. Once Jacob came at the end of himself, right? That's when the fight really began. And I've experienced this in my own life. When I was battling depression, when I was battling suicidal thoughts, that's when I came to end of myself, that's when the fight really began. That's when I really had to wrestle with God. That's when I really had to wrestle with the scriptures. So understand that what you're going through, if you're being tempted to flee from it because of how hard it is, because of how hard it is to walk through, because how hard it is to talk about those issues in therapy, because how hard it is to pray to God during this season, how hard it is to go to your pastor or go to those people in your church. If you're feeling that, understand that you must walk through it. But you're not walking through it alone. You're walking through it with the Lord. But nonetheless, it has to be something that you have to walk through if you want to see that growth. Otherwise, you're just delaying your own healing. And remember how the scripture that we just read in the text, how Jacob still had a limp afterwards. He still had a limp after he had received his blessing, right? So he received a limp. He also received a new name. The same thing happens when we're battling through mental health things. You may still leave with a few scars. You may leave with some evidence that you went through something. However, with the same way how someone from the outside can look at Jacob and see his limp, and then if they were to ask him about where did you get that limp from, he can say that he wrestled with God and he received the blessing. In the same way, you can do the same thing with your mental health. Jacob's limp was a testament of God's work in his life, God's blessing in his life. Whatever you leave with, whatever struggle that you have, even the scars you have, it will be a testament of God's work in your life, which will help other people so they can glorify your Father in heaven. That was a lot, so we're going to end right there. I really want you to really just sit with what we just went through. Understand that the discomfort is part of the process. Nothing is wrong because you are uncomfortable. Nothing is wrong because you are struggling. I went through it, and by God's grace, has been delivered. Every person who has gone through something mentally, has worked through that trauma, has to walk through this. So understand that you are not alone. The Lord your God is with you. He's guiding you, and He's on the other side of it. He knows what's necessary in order for you to see that healing. So trust in Him. And if you need help with experiencing God's peace in deeper levels, I want to encourage you to get my free devotional, Peace Over Panic. You can find the link for that in the description. And be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. I think that's pretty much it. So remember, above all that, you got this because God's got you. Peace out.